The night she stole the baby, the rain came like judgment. It hammered against the roof of the General Hospital in Ikeja, drumming a chaotic rhythm that matched the thunder in Margaret's chest. She stood in the shadows near the maternity ward, cloaked in a blue nurse's jacket that wasn't hers, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure still listened. The corridor lights flickered, casting sharp cuts of light across the linoleum floor. Somewhere down the hallway, a baby cried, not a whimper, not a fuss, but a scream, as if it already knew something was wrong. Margaret's heart clenched. She didn't want to do this, but she had to. For 7 years, she had walked through life with a hollow womb and a smiling face. Her husband, Peter, loved her with the unshakable certainty of a good man. He built their 3-bedroom bungalow in Gbagada, block by block with sweat and hope. Every night, he wrapped his arms around her, whispering that their child would come soon. "We just need to keep praying," he always said. "God makes all things beautiful in his time." But Margaret knew something Peter didn't. There would be no child, ever. She was born with Mullerian agenesis. No uterus, no chance, no future as a mother. A secret sealed into her blood long before she understood what infertility meant. She had known since she was 17, when the doctor explained why she hadn't started her period. She had cried for a week, begged God for a miracle, then decided to bury the truth under years of carefully arranged lies. She married Peter, knowing she could never give him children. And every day since, she had lived with the quiet terror that the truth would one day destroy him, destroy them. And now, as the storm howled through the city and the hospital buzzed with the usual chaos, she had come to do the unthinkable. She had spent weeks watching the ward, studying the shifts, befriending nurses, wearing borrowed scrubs from an old friend who worked housekeeping. The plan was as desperate as it was simple. Find a baby with no known relatives, snatch him in the confusion of the storm, and vanish. No paperwork, no trace, no goodbye. The baby had no name. His mother had died during delivery. The father was unknown. It felt like fate. Margaret stepped into the ward. Her hands trembled under the soft fabric of the gloves. Her heart hammered so loud she thought it would wake the sleeping nurses. But she moved forward, silent, her eyes on the small bassinet by the window. The child was swaddled in a thin yellow cloth, his tiny face scrunched in discomfort. He was beautiful. Without thinking, Margaret reached down and touched his cheek. Warm! Real. Alive. She scooped him up, cradled him against her chest, and whispered the name she had picked out in her dreams. Ethan. The moment she said it, he stopped crying. She wrapped him tighter and turned away from the ward, stepping out into the corridor and then into the storm. She didn't look back. By morning, they were gone. Peter cried when she placed Ethan in his arms. "My God, Maggie," he sobbed, cradling the child like a holy gift. I don't even know what to say." Margaret wept too. She let her husband believe it had been a miracle, a divine answer after years of drought. She told him she had gone to pray at a rural maternity, center run by a missionary, and had stumbled upon a baby that had been left behind. She lied with a smile, and Peter believed her. For years, they were happy. Ethan grew into a vibrant, beautiful boy. Sharp eyes, bright smile, kind soul. He loved music and painting, hated math, and had a habit of asking deep questions far too early. "Why don't I look like either of you?" he asked once at age 7. Margaret's heart froze, but Peter laughed. "You got your face from an angel," he said. "You're ours. That's all that matters." Ethan nodded, satisfied. But Margaret wasn't. She loved him with a fierceness that bordered on obsession. Every day she watched him, studied him, memorized his laugh, his smell, his walk. He was her secret redemption, the child she could never have, yet somehow had. Her miracle, her sin, her second heartbeat. Peter spoiled him, gave him the best, saved every naira for his education. At 18, Ethan won a scholarship to study architecture at Covenant University. Margaret fought the idea of him living on campus, but Peter insisted. "He's a man now," he said. "He needs to become his own." But Margaret couldn't let go. She called every day, sent food every weekend, traveled to see him monthly, smiling tightly at the girls, who looked at her son with dreamy eyes. She could see it in their giggles, in the way they touched his arm. They wanted him, and she hated them for it. By the time Ethan turned 22, he had become everything a mother could dream of. Gentle, talented, respectful, but he had also become distant. He wanted space. He wanted privacy. He had fallen in love with a girl named Amara, beautiful, bold and smarter than Margaret liked. "I want to marry her," Ethan said one evening over dinner. Margaret's fork froze mid-air. Peter clapped his shoulder. "That's my boy." But Margaret said nothing. She smiled. But inside her, something twisted. She couldn't let it happen. She had stolen Ethan from God, from fate, from his real mother. She had raised him, fed him, prayed over him. He was hers, her son, her child, her everything. And now he wanted to give himself to someone else? "No!" She began slowly, planted doubts in his ear. "She doesn't seem like she respects your dreams. I heard she talks to other boys on campus. She's not strong enough to be a wife." Ethan pushed back at first, but Margaret was patient. She cried. She pretended to be sick. She clutched her chest when he argued. "You're leaving me, Ethan," she whispered once. "Just like everyone does." He stayed. He broke things off with Amara. Peter didn't understand. He confronted Margaret in the kitchen one night, his eyes tight with worry. "What are you doing to him?" he asked. "You've become possessive." "I'm his mother," she snapped. "You're acting like you're in love with him." The silence that followed was thick and sharp. Peter backed away slowly, shaking his head. Something had cracked in his eyes. He began digging. He found the old newspaper article, the one about a missing baby at General Hospital in 1999. The dates matched. The details, the storm, everything. When he confronted her, she broke. "I had no choice," she sobbed. "I couldn't give you a child. I was born this way, Peter. I lied to you. I lied because I loved you. I just wanted to be whole." Peter said nothing. He walked out of the house and never returned. 2 days later, he collapsed in church. Heart attack. He died before he hit the floor. Margaret screamed when she got the call. At the funeral, Ethan stood between her and the world, grief burning in his chest. But something inside him had already begun to stir. He had found the crumpled article in his father's study. He had heard the whispers, the doubts. The story didn't make sense anymore. He confronted her 2 weeks after the burial. "I want the truth," he said. She tried to lie again, but this time her mouth failed her. So she told him everything. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood up, looked at her like she was something he had never seen before, and said one sentence she would never forget. "You killed my father." He walked out and never came back. Margaret sat in Ethan's empty room the night he left. The walls were covered in certificates, art sketches, photographs of birthdays and Sunday outings. His scent still clung to the pillow. She sat there, staring at the door, waiting for the sound of footsteps. They never came. In the days that followed, the house turned into a tomb. The curtains stayed closed. Meals remained untouched. Church friends came by to check in, but she sent them away with forced smiles and tired excuses. Her heart was no longer beating in her chest. It had gone with her son. She tried to call, once then twice, then every day. No answer. She sent messages, voice notes, prayers. All went unanswered. At the foundation, where Peter used to volunteer, people stopped greeting her with warmth. She saw the whispers behind cupped hands, the stares that lingered too long. The truth had leaked through the cracks of her life like water through broken tiles. She became a ghost in her own neighborhood. One afternoon, she walked into Ethan's studio. His paintbrushes were still soaked in color. A canvas sat half-finished on the easel, a portrait of a woman holding a baby, her eyes filled with a sadness that now looked too familiar. She collapsed to her knees. "God, please," she whispered, clutching the canvas. "Bring him back to me. Take everything else, but not him, not my son." But silence answered. Ethan, meanwhile, lived like a man running from himself. He moved into a flat in Yaba and buried himself in design projects. Days turned into nights filled with deadlines and noise, and whatever distractions he could find. But nothing dulled the ache. The grief over his father's death sat like a rock on his chest. The betrayal from the woman he once called. Mum sliced through him with every breath. He remembered the bedtime stories, the way she hummed him to sleep, how she prayed over his exams, the birthday cakes, the matching Sunday clothes. Was all of it fake? He didn't know how to process it. He tried to talk to Amara, the girl he had once loved, but she had moved on. Her voice was colder now, guarded. "Everyone told me to leave," she said. "I just didn't think it would be your mother who made it impossible." He apologized. She didn't respond, so he stopped calling. Time passed, but nothing healed. Until one night, Ethan was walking home after a gallery launch, when he saw a small boy standing by a street pole crying. The child looked no older than 6, dressed in torn shorts and a stained t-shirt, lost in the crowd. People passed him without pause. Ethan stopped. "What's your name?" he asked. "David," the boy sniffled. I lost my auntie." Ethan looked around. No one seemed to be looking for a child. He took the boy's hand and sat with him on a bench for hours, until a frantic woman came running down the street, tears in her eyes. She collapsed in relief when she saw the boy. That night Ethan couldn't sleep. David reminded him of himself. Alone, frightened, unclaimed, it stirred something in him he had tried to bury. His own origin story. His real mother, whoever she was. His real past. And the woman who raised him in lies but loved him fiercely. He found himself standing outside the house in Gbagada a week later. The gate hadn't been painted in months. The garden was overgrown. He could see the porch light flickering through the windows. He stood there for nearly 20 minutes. Then he turned and left. Inside, Margaret had watched him through the blinds. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. But when he walked away, she collapsed onto the floor and sobbed. Weeks later, Ethan received a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A letter. It was handwritten, shaky and smudged. "My son, I have no words left. Only regret. I was born without a womb, but not without a heart. And everything in my heart belonged to you. I lied, I stole. I sinned, but I never stopped loving you, not for a second. Your father died with a broken heart, and that will haunt me forever. But I beg you, don't let it haunt you too. You don't have to come back. You don't have to forgive me. But please be happy, be whole. Your mother, even if I don't deserve the word." Ethan folded the letter and put it in his drawer. He didn't reply, but he didn't throw it away either. Margaret grew thin. The doctors called it stress-induced depression. She stopped eating. Stopped talking. The house became a shell. Friends stopped coming. Her life had shrunk to a memory. But she didn't die. She waited. Every knock at the door made her heart jump. Every young man she saw in the market made her chest ache. And every morning she whispered the same prayer. "Let him find peace, even if it's without me." Then one Sunday morning, nearly a year after the truth had shattered, their lives, there was a knock. Soft, hesitant. Margaret opened the door, and there he was, taller than she remembered, thinner, sadder. But Ethan, she didn't speak, neither did he. He just looked at her, his eyes stormy, unreadable. Then he said, "I'm not here to forgive you." Margaret nodded. "I just came to tell you," he continued, "that I don't know who I am. And I don't know if I'll ever trust you again, but you raised me, and for what it's worth. I don't hate you." She collapsed into tears. He didn't hug her. He didn't come in, but he stood there until she stopped crying. Then he walked away, and that was enough for now. The weeks after that brief moment at the door moved slowly, like time itself was reluctant to carry Margaret forward. She didn't leave the house. There was nowhere to go. Her world had shrunk into 4 walls, filled with photographs of a boy who no longer called her mother, and a husband whose voice she only heard in dreams. The ache was constant, like a heartbeat with no rhythm. Ethan didn't return, but he didn't disappear either. Every month, like clockwork, a food delivery arrived at her gate. Groceries, toiletries, medication, sometimes a card that read, "Take care of yourself." No name, but she didn't need one. He hadn't forgiven her. He hadn't forgotten. But somewhere beneath the rubble of their broken bond, something still remained. She lived for that. Ethan, on his part, tried to rebuild a life from the ashes. He opened his own small design firm in Lekki, took on residential projects, found peace in lines and spaces, in transforming chaos into beauty. Clients loved his quiet focus, his eye for warmth and symmetry. But his nights were restless. He would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering who he truly was. He didn't know his birth mother's name. He didn't know why she died. He didn't know if there was someone out there who might have looked at him once and whispered, "He's mine." And sometimes he thought of Margaret, not as the woman who lied, but as the woman who kissed his bruises, stayed up during his exams, and made pancakes in the shape of hearts. Pain and love lived side by side now, and he couldn't evict either. One day, while supervising a site near Surulere, he saw a small school with peeling paint and children playing in a dusty yard. A woman, likely a teacher, was wiping a child's nose with the edge of her wrapper, while another child cried beside her. Chaos, noise, love. He watched them for a long time. Then he went home and designed a school. Bright colors, wide windows, an open courtyard with a garden in the center. He named it the Grace Project. Months passed. The school was built. When it opened, he donated the first year's operational costs in his father's name. The plaque at the entrance read, "For the father who built homes, and the mother who gave me one." He didn't invite Margaret to the launch, but the next morning, when she opened her front door, there was a glossy flyer on the step. The Grace Project. She pressed it to her chest and wept for hours. One morning, over a year later, she opened her door and found Ethan standing there. He wasn't smiling. He looked tired, older, but something in his eyes had softened. "I wanted you to know," he said, "that I'm seeing someone." Margaret's heart skipped. "She's kind," he continued. "Grounded, not easily fooled." Margaret gave a weak smile. "She doesn't know everything yet, but she will. And if she stays after that, then I'll know I'm ready to be a husband." Margaret nodded slowly. "What's her name?" "Zara." "Pretty. She makes me feel like I'm allowed to hope again." Margaret swallowed the lump in her throat. "You deserve that," she whispered. There was a pause. Then Ethan said, "I'm not here for your blessing. I don't need it. But I thought you should hear it from me." Margaret nodded. "Thank you," she said. Before he left, she asked, "Will you ever call me Mum again?" He looked at her for a long time. Then quietly he said, "Not yet." She nodded again. He turned and walked down the street. That night, Margaret sat at her window and watched the moon rise. It reminded her of the night she used to hum lullabies to Ethan, back when he believed she was his beginning and end. She missed that illusion, but more than that, she missed him, as he was, as he is, as he might be. And so she wrote again, not to ask for forgiveness, not to explain, just to tell a story. She wrote about a little girl born without a womb, who grew up believing she was less, who thought she could trick the world into giving her something she wasn't meant to have, who carried her shame like a secret wrapped in silence, who lied to a man who loved her because she feared the day he might stop. She ended the letter with this: "You were never my mistake, but I made one the day I thought love could only be earned through lies. I stole you because I couldn't create you, but I raised you because I adored you. If you never call me mother again, I understand. But know this, my love for you was real, even if my story wasn't. Always, Margaret." She folded the letter and left it on her shelf. She didn't know if he'd ever read it. She didn't care. Writing it was enough. Time marched on. Ethan got engaged to Zara. They visited one day, unannounced. Zara was sweet, warm, and respectful. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pretend to understand. She just smiled and held Ethan's hand. Margaret served them tea with shaking fingers. Before they left, Zara hugged her. "She must love you very much," she whispered. Margaret didn't reply. Ethan walked her to the door. As he turned to leave, he said, "She wants to name our son Peter." Margaret closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was alone. But this time her heart was full. Not whole, but full. And that was enough. Years later, after Margaret passed quietly in her sleep, Ethan came to clean out her house. He walked through each room slowly. In the corner of her shelf, he found the letter. He read it once, then again. Then he sat down and cried. He buried her beside Peter, under a mango tree where they used to sit on Sunday afternoons. On her tombstone he had carved one line: "She gave me a lie wrapped in love, and I became a man because of it." And when his own son asked him one day, "What was she like, Grandpa's wife?" Ethan smiled. "She was complicated," he said, "but she never stopped loving me. Not even once. And in that, her legacy lived on. Sometimes love isn't always honest, but it is still real. And in the end, the truth we run from is often the truth we must face to be free. Healing doesn't always come from being right, but from being brave enough to confront what broke us. Let this story remind you, some wounds don't disappear, but love, even flawed, can still leave behind a legacy of growth and grace. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on notifications for more stories. Thank you for tuning in.